Out of all the many pre-built PC reviews that we've done on this channel, Corsair always seems to deliver some of the best. But have they lived up to that reputation for this latest generation of pre-builts? If you watch this entire video, you will know by the end if this PC is right for you or not. I'm gonna give you everything that you need to know in this 100% honest and unbiased review of the Corsair Vengeance a7300. Now, you may be coming to this video after watching my more fun and entertaining unboxing of this PC, but this video is actually the important one that you need to watch before pulling the trigger and actually buying it. I'm gonna quickly zip you through the unboxing process and what's included, take you through some incredibly thorough gaming and creator benchmarks, talk about the design and build quality, the internals, thermals, fan noise, overall ease of use, comparing its price to performance ratios against the competition, as well as my top pros and cons. If you decide against this PC after sharing what I found, keep watching because I'm also going to be showing you some alternatives that I do recommend. And if it's understandably just too expensive, don't worry, I've got specific recommendations for every budget. I cover this machine very thoroughly, so I can confidently say by the end of this video, you will know if this PC is right for you or not, if you watch the whole thing. But if you still have any questions after watching this entire video, just shoot me a comment, and if you're publicly subscribed, I guarantee a personal response. This model that I'm reviewing for you today includes the latest AMD Ryzen 9 7900X CPU, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090 GPU, and 5600 MHz of DDR5 RAM. Upon opening the box, you're graced with a very fancy set of very obvious instructions. Then after removing the outer foam and power lifting this heavy PC out, you'll find your super beefy power cable, Wi-Fi antennas, and user manual. Then after removing the plastic before you turn it on, do not forget to remove the internal protective foam. The design of this computer is pretty much identical to that Corsair i7300 that I reviewed last year. Using Corsair's very popular and widely used 4000D case, this minimalist design will kind of be a breath of fresh air to those who are just sick and tired of the more cheesy and over-the-top gaming PC designs. This one just has more of a mature look. On the front, we've got a detachable grille that covers up the main dust filter to keep everything looking clean, and the top also has a similar magnetic dust filter that can also be removed. The RGB lighting effects throughout the case look great, but just like last year, I kind of wish there was something here on the bottom half, as it just feels a little too empty and slightly imbalanced. I also wish this glass panel right here wasn't tinted so you could see the RGB at their full brightness. It would just make it pop a lot better during the daytime. You could always dim it down with software controls. But those are just minor things. Overall, I love the look. Internally, we've got 6 fans total for this case. These 3 120mm intake fans pull fresh air into this chassis and carry all the heat that's generated from the components out this back fan, as well as these top 2 fans. The main job of these 2 fans, though, is to cool this CPU right here. Heat is quickly transferred up through these tubes into a radiator, where it's then spread out and then blown out. And then next to the CPU is our gorgeous Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB DDR5 RAM. We've got 2 sticks of 32GB for a total of 64, but you've also got 2 additional slots if you want even more than that. On the other side of the CPU, underneath this massive heat sink, we've got our main SSD that everything is stored on, with an additional one behind the 4090 GPU. This Founders Edition RTX 4090 GPU is massive, super heavy. But even with how thick this graphics card is, there's still plenty of room underneath for expansion cards. And then on the back of the computer, we've got even more upgradability with 2 slots for 2.5-inch SSDs and open slots for 2 3.5-inch SATA hard drives on the bottom. And then next to that is our modular and upgradable 1000 watt power supply, which is a Corsair RM1000X. For the ports on the top, we've got a power button, a USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port, a headphone and microphone combo jack, and your reset button. For the ports on the back, we've got a flash BIOS button, a useless HDMI and display port, 2 USB-C and 2 USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 ports, 4 USB-A 3.2 Gen 1 ports, your Ethernet jack, connectors for your antennas, your high-quality SPDIF output, rear speaker, center speaker, microphone, line out, and line in. And on the back of your super powerful 4090 graphics card, an HDMI port, and 3 display ports. Now, checking out the included software, we've got this Corsair Diagnostics app right here. Here you've got a bunch of different tests that'll help you scan for any issues throughout your computer. Then under My Device, we've got a nice broad overview of how your CPU, GPU, and storage are currently behaving. And then we've got this CPU-Z app that gives you much more in-depth info on all of that. All right, now for the IQ software. This controls all the lighting effects, and honestly, the only easy to use part was on the Home tab, and I really did not like like any of these included lighting effects. I mean, watercolor was okay, but the others were just way too crazy. To actually customize this even further, you had to dive deeper into each of these components individually to enable more options that actually look quite a bit better. I definitely think a slow rolling rainbow wave looks really nice across this entire chassis. And lastly, in the MSI Center, the only thing that you'll probably use here is the user scenario section. Here you can select your profile for extreme performance or balanced and silent for quieter fans at reduced performance. Now when it came to the fan noise, these were my tests after testing each of the main fan profiles. In quiet and idle mode, it was just a little over 41 decibels. And when moving up to performance mode with smart fans on, it brought the noise level up to 42 decibels. And then manually pushing these powerful fans to full speed mode brought it up to only 43 decibels. This was very impressive, and as you can see, it proved to be the lowest fan noise out of all the pre-builts that I've tested. Now for the thermals, you can see in our thermal imaging test that much of that heat is successfully exiting out the top exhaust vents with only a small amount of heat getting held up by the side glass panel. In contrast, even with the side ventilation on the new Alienware Aurora R15, you can see that a lot of the heat gets trapped right there next to the GPU. Now removing this Corsair's glass panel, it reveals just a little bit more of what's going on here. The only real hot spot that we see is right here behind the GPU at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and then spinning around to the back, the only hot spot that we really found here was in that power supply area. I also did some extremely thorough testing in gaming as well. These were our CPU temperatures for several different games at 4K. Just look how much cooler it is than the new Alienware Aurora R15. That was kind of expected though, because AMD is known to be much cooler than Intel. But when it came to just the GPU temps in 4K, this PC's 4090 was again significantly cooler than the 4090 and the R15 as well. In fact, when averaging all these gaming temperatures together, this was overall the coolest pre-built that I've ever reviewed. Having a PC that runs too hot for too long will shorten the overall lifespan, so it was very encouraging to see the Corsair Vengeance a7300 staying so cool. Now for the performance and gaming benchmarks, the second most important part of this review. The most important part is the price to performance ratio, and we'll get to that here in a second. For Geebench 5, we got a single core score of 2,191 and a multi-core score of 19,766. This was just a little under what the Alienware Aurora R15 could do. For Cinebench R23, which simulates its 3D rendering power, we got a multi-core score of 28,623 and a single core score of 2,006. It lost to the R15 here as well, but again, the latest AMD CPUs are not as powerful as Intel's latest. Another helpful test for you 3D renderers out there is the V-Ray benchmark, and these were our CUDA RTX and overall V-Ray performance scores. The V-Ray GPU scores showed this PC to absolutely dominate, which basically means it's going to be really good for real-time viewport rendering and high polygon 3D modeling. But the overall V-Ray performance score showed it to be again just under what the Alienware Aurora R15 could do, meaning the longer overnight CPU rendering will be slightly faster on the R15. And if you use Blender, these were our scores that we got with their benchmark. Again, showing it to be stronger with the GPU results, but not as strong with the CPU score. And the last benchmarks for creatives before we get into gaming are the Puget benchmarks. For DaVinci Resolve, we got 2,793, which you can see here is quite a bit faster than previous gen pre-builts and just a hair below the R15. Adobe Premiere 1,321, almost tied with the R15 here. Adobe Photoshop 1,610, which is majorly in the lead here. And After Effects 1,347, again holding second place here. For 3D Mark, which is a great benchmark used to determine a computer's overall gameability, we got an overall score of 29,680, a graphics score of 35,532, and a CPU score of 15,353. This was the highest graphics score that I've ever seen in a pre-built PC. But you can see the overall score is just barely below the R15, as that one has the faster 13th gen Intel processor. For the main drive, the SSD that everything is stored on, I got speeds of 6.7 gigabytes read and 4.9 gigabits write. Actual gaming benchmarks is probably what you guys care the most about though. These were our average FPS results we got for several games at their highest preset settings in HD. You can see that both of these latest gen pre-builds we've tested perform significantly better than their predecessors. And averaging all these gaming tests together, you can see that this less expensive Corsair pre-built actually performs slightly better. Same thing with our average FPS at 1440p. And as expected, there's an even larger gap when comparing gaming FPS at 4K 4K with these new pre-builts next to their previous gen versions. That's just insane how much more frames per second you can get now. Averaging all these numbers together, you get an even greater perspective on how much of a jump this is. The Alienware Aurora R15 just barely steps into first place above the Corsair PC when jumping up to 4K, but just wait until you see these price to performance ratios. Now, price-wise, this PC with maxed out specs like the one that we have will run you about $4,000. This is about $50 more than the latest Intel version, which is labeled the i7-400. Now, the least expensive pre-built that I've found with the latest CPU and GPU comes from iBuyPower for $3,500. My experience with iBuyPower, though, is that they usually don't perform as well as the competition, even with the same specs. Skytech usually performs pretty well from my experience, though. Their new Mark 40 series with these same latest gen specs cost a little over $4,500. 40 series GPUs and 13th gen CPUs are also available in pre-builts from Origin PC. Their similar spec Genesis cost a little more than that Skytech at around $4,800, and CLX with the latest AMD CPU $4,900, and the most overpriced latest gen gaming pre-built award goes to the Alienware Aurora R15. That's going to run you $5,100 for those same specs. So as you can see, Corsair fares pretty well against the competition here. Now, comparing all these top PCs that I've reviewed to each other, you can see that last year's Alienware Aurora R13 is the biggest ripoff when factoring in its dollar per FPS ratio. This year's R15 is a much better bang for your buck than that, but it still doesn't even come close to this new Corsair Vengeance a7300. And I predict the Intel version, the Corsair Vengeance i7-400, to have an even better ratio. The most consistently sold PC that I saw come through affiliate links on this channel was for the Skytech Prism 2. And you can see here that that one is still a pretty good deal for your money. I've got a link below to watch that review as well, but if you don't have the time, long story short, I highly recommend that one. $1,000 less than this Corsair PC and $2,000 less than that Alienware. Now, my top cons for this computer. Number one were the startup times. Many times when this happens with a new pre-built PC, it gets resolved with a BIOS update, and it is a minor thing, but it was worth noting because sometimes it took over a minute to boot up to Windows. And number two was the rendering performance. While this computer was still very fast in every category, especially gaming, it was still not as fast as the competition when it came to 3D rendering. My overall top pros for this computer, number one was the thermals. As you saw in the previous graphs, it was the coolest pre-built PC that I've ever tested. Very impressive considering how powerful it is. And number two was the fan noise. Not all gamers care about this as they're only really pushing the computer to its max when they have headphones on in gaming, but for those of you who do get annoyed by loud fans, you'll be pleased to know that this is one of the quietest. And number three is upgradability. 2 PCIe SSD slots, 2 2.5-inch SSD bays, 2 3.5-inch hard drive bays, a modular power supply, and plenty of room underneath the GPU make this computer very flexible for upgrading. Overall, this PC's great performance, quiet fans, and extremely low temperatures make it very easy to recommend if you like AMD. I personally am an Intel fan that prefers higher performance over cooler temperatures. I know the Intel version, the Corsair Vengeance i7-400, will be even faster, and it's actually what I recommend over this PC, even before I get one from Corsair to review. $4,000 is actually a pretty good deal for these top-of-the-line pre-builts. If you have a budget closer to $3,000, then the Skytech Prism 2 or the Corsair Vengeance i7-300 with the 3090, those are great options too. Under $2,000, I'd go with the Skytech Chronos, and closer to $1,000, I'd go with the CyberPower PC Gamer Extreme. Links below to all of these. Now, if you do decide to purchase this PC or one of the others that I mentioned in this video, then please remember to use my affiliate links in the comments and description below, as I get a small commission at no cost to you for every single purchase made. And it's actually a major factor in keeping this channel going and getting better and better for you. I'd also like to personally thank all of my members for their monthly contribution to this channel. I really appreciate you guys. Every little bit helps. And remember, every week I do a giveaway that randomly selects someone who's interacted with this channel in some way or filled out the form in the description. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on to stay up to date with that, as well as staying up to date with all of my latest PCs. And the winner for this week's Amazon.com e-gift card giveaway is
Brady McKinney.
Thanks for watching, guys. I love you guys. God bless.